right, so Dr. Cornel West, he is a candidate for president with the Green Party. He's switched from the People's Party to the Green Party. He was recently on Jimmy Dore's show, and they battled over vaccine mandates. I want to play this clip for you and then comment my thoughts on it, but here this is. Watch it.
So here's the Green Party, what they said. They said the Green Party, which you're running with, the Green Party of the United States Steering Committee strongly supports the use of vaccines, vaccine mandates, and quarantines as part of a comprehensive public health effort to curb and eradicate the novel coronavirus pandemic that has swept the globe since early 2020. The whole thing was a hoax. And here's what the Black Caucus of the Green Party said. They said the National Black Caucus of the Green Party of the United States strongly opposes the use of forced vaccination via mandates and the discrimination that is being generated around these policies. Lockdowns, mandates, and passports are the major issue of the day, with millions of people protesting against them worldwide. In fact, what has become known as the medical freedom movement is arguably the biggest and most diverse international movement in world history. Vaccine mandates and vaccine passports are among the most vile, unconstitutional, immoral, unscientific, discriminatory, and outright criminal policies ever forced upon the population, and goes against everything the Green Party stands for under social justice. Do you share the sentiment of the Black Caucus of the Green Party, and have you talked to them?
Well, one thing, it's good to have a Green Party where you have a variety of different voices that are clashing, and the tensions are very real. I think there's no doubt that the pharmaceutical company has played a disproportionate role in shaping public policy. I think the kind of concerns that you and RFK Jr. and others have certainly are well grounded in that sense. On the other hand, we know there's been a whole host of vaccines in regard to other kinds of illnesses that are much more effective. The question becomes making sure, and one of the things I want to do, I want to have a truth commission to find out exactly what was the level of corruption that took place during these years, be able to see not just the text, we know the books are out there, but to have a truth commission so that we can see what voices were marginalized, what voices were pushed aside, and make sure it never happens again. I resonate with the spirit of what my Green Black brothers and sisters are saying, but the Green Party itself does allow this kind of disagreement and so on. But I'll say this still, brother, I know I got to go, but I must say, see, this is where you and I do in some ways live in different worlds, because as crucial and as important as the issue of vaccines and the COVID situation was, when you say that's probably the most important issue in your lifetime or in the last 25 or 30 years, in light of all the wars, in light of what Palestinians are going through, in light of what workers are going through, 63% of them are living paycheck to paycheck, in terms of all the vicious attacks of the police and the murders and so forth, yet this vaccine issue is the most important thing. I say, okay, that's my dear brother Jimmy. He's got a right to raise his voice. I'm not going to in any way push it away, but I just live in a different world. As important as vaccines have been, if I had another chance, I'd be leaning much more with the Black Caucus. But when I think of the weightiest issues, vaccines does not come immediately to mind. It just doesn't. That's the kind of world we live in, brother.
Okay.
Maybe I spend,
Well, here it is. Black business owners collapsed by 41%. Black business because of lockdowns. Do you care yet?
Well, no,
70,000 workers in one state were fired because of vaccine mandates. When are you going to care? Do they all have to be trans? When are you going to care about these workers? What are you going to care about? What are you going to care about this?
They have to be trans for me to care.
You don't care. You don't care. Why don't you care about this?
Why would you accuse me? Of course I care about it.
You're saying it's not important.
I didn't say it wasn't important. I said it was not the most fundamental issue in my lifetime the last 30 years.
Forced medical experiments? Forced medical experiments that the scheme.
Where is the nuance?
Oh, my God.
Where is the complexity?
So you missed this story and you're not interested in getting it right.
You agree with Jimmy Dore.
So you missed this story and you're not interested. Well, Dr. West, I wish you the best. You know I love you. You know I support.
You and your precious wife and your family. You stay strong, though, brother.
Okay, I wish you all the best. I love you. Thanks for coming on. I really do wish you all the best. And I just wish you had a clearer message to reach people, but you don't. It's muddled and it's a loser.
Oh, Jimmy. Oh, man. Okay. That was it was a bit hostile. I mean, look, Dr. Cornel West did say that if he had to do it again, he'd maybe side more with the Black Caucus rather than what the Green Party said, which is that they're really for vaccine mandates and whatnot. But Dr. Cornel West claiming that, this is, he's saying, but this is not the most important issue of our time. What's interesting about this clip is that when Jimmy Dore posted it, or when it was circulating on social media, I read through the comment section, and a lot of the comments were agreeing with Cornel West. They actually thought that Jimmy was off his rocker and that vaccine mandates and that the lockdowns and COVID was not the most important thing of our trial of our day, that there are so many other issues that are more important than this. And I think that just kind of goes to show the attitude of those who lean towards the Green Party. I think a lot of those commenting are people who probably, well, from what I saw, they were people who supported Bernie Sanders at one point. They used to follow Jimmy. Maybe they don't as much anymore ever since the pandemic. They lean green. They're also the type of people who believe Joe Biden must win. If it's between Biden and Trump, that Trump should lose at all costs and that Joe Biden should be the one winning. A lot of people believe in this group that Cornel West running for president is a distraction away from Biden, that he should not be doing it. A lot of people in this group, and they believe that Cornel West is right, that Jimmy Dore is wrong, that vaccine mandates are not the most important or the most, dire civil rights issue that we have faced in our lifetime. I agree with Jimmy Dore on this. I do believe that the vaccine mandate issue, sure, you could, like Cornel West mentions people who've lost, people living in poverty, Palestinians and the treatment that they're going through. There's a lot of people with a lot of plights, but that doesn't include everybody. It's certain subgroups of people who are going through trials, who are going through civil rights abuses. And it's those groups of people who are affected, not all groups of people who are affected. The vaccine mandate really affected everyone. The lockdowns affected everyone. This was a mass scale civil rights abuse and authoritarian overreach by the government that was greater than what many, if not most people have experienced in their lifetimes, minus the people who lived and they're in their 90s and they lived during, Nazi Germany or something. What we saw during the pandemic it wasn't just about the vaccine mandates, the lockdown themselves, even though those were all very, very bad. It also had to do with the fact that the government had just reached a level of authoritarianism that they were able to impose these types of rules and regulations on people that could then be used later on in other ways. And that's it's beyond just what happened in this time period of the pandemic. It extends way beyond that. The power grab that they gained, what they were able to get from us that's the civil liberties issue and the biggest of our day. That could be used against any group at any time, not just the unvaccinated. That's the group that they went after this time. But the fact that they were allowed to gain this power and that so many people went along with it, and so many, like Dr. Cornel West, are willing to shove it aside and say, yeah, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad. That's how they continue to gain this power and then use it against us in the future, even against groups whom Dr. Cornel West mentioned he wants to protect. Those groups could be the next ones subject to the authoritarian mandates of the US government and of our fellow neighbors, friends, and family who went along with it. The only thing I can think of that was worse than the vaccine mandate, which was forcing a person to pump a drug into their body that they did not want to pump into their body. Many people took it willingly, but a lot of people did not. A lot of people took it because they felt forced to take it. It was either that or lose their job. And if they lost their job, they didn't know how they were going to feed their families or pay their mortgages. So they were under duress when they took this vaccine. The only thing I could think of that would be akin or worse would be a wartime draft, which happened during Vietnam. Being forced to do something with your body that you don't want to do is one of the worst things that could happen to you. So especially if you're being asked to sacrifice your life, that's what happens in a wartime draft. The fact that the government can call you up and say, suit up, I'm sending you off to war like a pawn who could be sacrificed. This is what we're doing right now to the Ukrainian people with the war. And you got guys like Mitt Romney sitting there saying, isn't this great? we're not losing a single American. We're just, though the Ukrainians are fighting. They're doing all the fighting and we're providing them. And it's like 5% of our budget and no American lives lost. That's how they view. That's how the elites view us, as just plebes. They don't care, and we're just pawns for throwing into the battle. And so a draft is that same sort of, I don't care about you. You're just a pawn. You're probably going to go off and die. Oh, well, thanks for your service to the country. That is the only thing I could think of that I think is a greater human rights abuse than a vaccine mandate is a wartime mandate to force people into war. I think if your country cannot rile up its citizens to go to war because the people of your country want to fight for you, yeah, then maybe you should rethink your war. Maybe you should rethink what's going on. If your people don't want to rise up, we saw even after 9/11, we saw the whole country come together, whether it was under false pretenses, we'll go into that another time. In fact, I have a guest tomorrow night talking about that specifically on the show. But nonetheless, during that time, Americans rose up and Americans said, I'm going to fight for my country. And we saw people signing up. There didn't need to be a draft to protect the United States. People signed up in line. There was just lines and lines and lines out of recruitment offices after 9/11, people wanting to protect the country. If you can't rile that up in people, if you can't get people to want to fight for you, I don't think that you should be able to force them to fight for you and force them to give their life to you. To me, that's just the bigger human rights abuse. So minus the Vietnam War draft or any other type of draft, World War II, if there are all these other drafts, in my lifetime, which I was born after the Vietnam War, I'm a product of it, Vietnamese, but in my lifetime, the vaccine mandate was the greatest human rights abuse I had witnessed on a group of people. So, I get there are lots of bad things that happen. There's lots of atrocities happening to people, but they're limited. And those people who also go through those things that Dr. Cornel West mentioned also were subject to lockdowns and mandates and whatever the pandemic brought upon those groups of people. They were also subject to those things as well, in addition to their already hard time. So now, one thing that Jimmy Dore also mentioned, he went on to talk about RFK Jr. He was really sad after this interview with Cornel West. He really, really likes Dr. Cornel West as a candidate. He's really, really sad. And afterwards, he just was quiet for a while. And then he mentioned RFK Jr. and he said, I like RFK Jr., but he's running as a Democrat. At least Cornel West is going to be on the general election. He'll be in the general election because he's running as a Green Party candidate. RFK Jr., on the other hand, will not be running. He's not going to be on the general election ticket because he's running as a Democrat and he's not going to get the nomination. And Jimmy said, I told him when I talked to him, you're not going to get the nomination. I told RFK Jr. the exact same thing. You're not going to go anywhere as a Democrat. Maybe you should run as a Republican or go independent, but it's not going to happen. They're going to stop you at every turn, and Joe Biden's going to be the nominee or somebody else, but they're not going to let it be you. So why are you doing this? Like, why don't you run on a different ticket? And Jimmy was right when he says, so it's kind of like a hopeless cause with RFK Jr. I hate to say that because I really like him. He's my favorite candidate, but it is hopeless. So as long as he's running as a Democrat, it would, especially since Democrats are just smearing him to where his voice, his message isn't even making change within the Democratic Party. At least with Bernie Sanders, at least when he ran, he didn't get the nomination. And I think many of us who liked Bernie Sanders probably should have realized the Democratic Party was so corrupt and crooked. They were never going to let him become the nominee. But we were blind thinking, no, this will be the time, change will be made. And it wasn't, obviously. But at least with Bernie Sanders, his campaign, it was taken seriously enough by Democrats that it forced them to move, the Overton window. They had to change and shift and adopt different platform positions. Even Joe Biden in the 2020 election, he had to adopt different positions because Bernie Sanders pushed him in that direction and it worked. With RFK Jr., we're not even getting the benefit of that. That's not even happening. I mean, they have decided to smear him, to throw him under the bus, to delegitimize him in any way they possibly can, that his message is not even moving the Democrats towards his goals. They're ignoring him completely. So it's a complete waste. I mean, his campaign is almost, which is sort of what Jimmy was saying as well. I mean, almost it's a complete waste unless he pivots. There's still hope. I still hold out hope that he's going to pivot and file as an independent by February. And if he does that, then he could be on the general, in the general election. But if he goes beyond that and he doesn't, and the Democrats inevitably don't give him the nomination because they're not going to, then he'd have to be a write-in on that ticket. And if he decides after that point to run still as an independent, go third party, there would be no third party. He'd have to run as an independent and he'd have to be a write-in. It just wouldn't work. I mean, he has to change. He needs to run on, either join the Libertarian ticket and get on the ballot and say, okay, I'll run as the Libertarian candidate, or he needs to go independent or something. But at least Dr. Cornel West is running on the Green Party ticket that gives him ballot access in most of the states. And he has a shot, it's a long shot, but at least it's still a shot at winning the election because his name's on the ballot. And that's the first step, right? You need your name on there if you're going to win at all. So I do want to mention real quickly here, I want to finish up with the People's Party. So he was with the People's Party and he switched to the Green Party, and mum was the word. When he came on this show to announce, it's when he first announced, the day that he announced he was running for president, it was the People's Party's Nick Brana who reached out and said, hey, Dr. Cornel West is going to run for president. And so they arranged for him to be on this show. Since then, they've remained mum about Cornel West moving on to the Green Party. But then today, they kind of unleashed, or maybe this was yesterday, but they unleashed on Dr. Cornel West and kind of read him the riot act on Twitter. So here's what they had to say, some of it. They said, Cornel West and his new Green Party team have completely destroyed his campaign. They threw out half of the populist platform that we had created when he switched to the Green Party, especially policies with left-right support like restore free speech, curb inflation, hand-counted paper ballots, end mass surveillance, restore press freedoms, restore net neutrality, break up big tech, support veterans, stop CBDCs, regulate AI, fix infrastructure, term limits in Congress, ban corporate lobbying. And they go on to say, why would you remove these policies from your platform? Will any of the podcasts supporting Cornel West admit and confront this? It's as if the Green Party is determined to be irrelevant, determined to alienate the right, determined to stay in its marginal sectarian silo for another few decades. Well, the Green Party is determined to alienate the right because they're not on the right at all. They're very left, too far left, obviously, because we saw what they said about vaccine mandates. They support those authoritarian rules and regulations. Goes on to say, I'm assuming Nick Brana wrote this, but I don't know. I don't have any facts on that. I'm just, I know he's the leader of the People's Party, and this sounds pretty like, so potentially he's the one who wrote this, but this is on the People's Party Twitter account. Says, the Green Party has represented the independent left for decades and has barely broken 1% of the vote in the last 20 years. It's a terminally woke and dysfunctional catastrophe. It sides against working people again and again. It sided with Big Pharma on vaccine mandates. It sided with the deep state on Russiagate. It's obsessed with identity politics and trans issues. It ran a pro-war presidential candidate 3 years ago. How is it that the Green Party's been around since the 80s and they've never organized a rage against the war machine or forced the vote? How is it they've never brought together a coalition of people from left to right against the establishment like we have at the People's Party? Well, because they're not the People's Party. I mean, that's why, because the Green Party is the Green Party and it's got its own agenda. It goes on to say that, I'm going to go skip ahead here. It's a big, long tweet thread. And if you're interested, you could read the whole thing because they're really giving it to Dr. Cornel West. They go on to say, we handed the Green Party a spectacular campaign on a silver platter, and they immediately drove it into the ground. They threw out our populist platform for a woke sectarian left one, have organized 0 campaign rallies, cratered the fundraising, crashed the media, flatlined the search traffic, destroyed the campaign's branding, and have barely communicated with the thousands of volunteers that we signed up for them. Cornel began the campaign by talking about how he was a populist, how he was going to go to Trump country and reach out to the white working class. That is true. He did say that. He and Laura Ingraham talked about how much they have in common and about uniting the left and right populists on Fox. All of that went out the window when the Green Party took over. Maybe. If the Green Party isn't controlled opposition, it should be. You will never unite a working class coalition for a political revolution by lecturing poor people about white supremacy or dismissing the devastation wrought on our lives by COVID mandates and lockdowns. It says, worst of all, Cornel West will almost certainly drop out before he even reaches election day. His family doesn't want him to spoil the election for Biden and get blamed for electing Trump. They're adamant about protecting his legacy. He and his family still think Biden is the lesser of evil, less fascist, less racist. They think there's a meaningful difference between Biden and Trump. So West is going to drop out and try to deliver the election for corrupt warmonger Joe Biden when it becomes clear that West won't win. His campaign will amount to a third Bernie run, where all the time, money, and energy sunk into it gets funneled right back to the establishment. And Biden will, of course, promise him some administration post or prestigious university position for swooping in and playing savior to the Democrats. The Green Party has held the left back for decades in this country and has nothing to show for it. It's a Democrat light party, an obstacle to organizing along class lines and building the coalitions necessary to revolutionize this country. As Ralph Nader told us in 2016, the Green Party is a mirage. It will never be bigger than it is today. Ooh, those are fighting words from the People's Party, isn't it? But probably not wrong when you think about it. The Green Party, the Green Party has a lot of infighting in itself, as Dr. Cornel West mentioned in that segment with Jimmy Dore, that they do not agree with one another on those vaccine mandates. There was a lot of, when that came out, Dr. Jill Stein told me when she was on this show that there was a lot of disagreement inside the Green Party about that. That there was, some of them wanted to push for that, and a lot of them did not. And so it seems to not know what it is, who it is, where it's going. And, but, again, Dr. Cornel West is going to be on the ticket in most states. I think Green Party has ballot access everywhere, if not almost everywhere. So that's what's really important. But, best of luck to him. I don't know. I mean, obviously I don't think it's going to work out. I agree that his campaign doesn't really have a solid message that's going to be uniting. And I do think that he's changed, as the People Party's mentioned, he's changed away from the Trump people, the Trump voters, uniting working class. And now, the Green Party dictates what the Green Party wants, and it's not that. So they don't care about the Trump people unless the Trump people are going to go green. All right, guys, let me tell you, gold is a very important resource. A lot of people looking into it, a lot of people looking into investing in it, kind of worried about what's going to happen with the US dollar, worried about our economy. And gold helps people survive all of this much of the time. And my own family's been able to flee war zone after war zone and survive by having physical gold with them on their possession. And I think that's a really important thing to have, in my opinion. The fact is, there is one asset that has withstood economic upheaval and has a history of being incredibly stable, and that is gold. So just visit birchgold.com/Kim for your free info kit. An expert will reach out to you. They're going to hold your hand through the whole process. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of happy customers. So just visit birchgold.com/Kim to get your free info kit on gold. Again, visit birchgold.com/Kim to get your info kit on the best way for you personally to invest in gold.